This is the sustainability session. It's where we talk about creating the conditions for this investment in building mRNA capacity in LMICs to last over time, and actually thrive over time. So, Martin, over to you.
Okay, no slides. I think you're probably getting tired of slides. So I'm going to sound like a stuck record now. I've been saying this non-stop for the last 2 years, but I'm going to say it again. There is no free lunch, no matter what you think you've just eaten. So essentially, we're building all of this capacity around the world, and this was built in the middle of COVID. And in the middle of COVID, governments say, we want factories now. Actually, we want factories yesterday. And then COVID kind of came to an end. And governments are now saying, yeah. What else are we going to do? Let's build a freeway, let's build an airport, or whatever. So the real question is, how are we going to make sure that all of these facilities that we are building, how to make sure they're going to still be there when the next pandemic comes? Because we know with absolute certainty the next pandemic will come. There's two things we don't know: when and what. Virus, bacteria, something else, aliens, and when. Now, so what this means is that each of these facilities that we have been supporting is able to make commercially viable products that they sell, and that there are people out there that say, I want this product. How much is it going to cost? Here, do you accept a credit card? So this is what we're driving towards. But the problem is most of the vaccine manufacturers on Earth, and that includes some big ones that I've worked for, they are not research entities. They are manufacturing entities. They go and buy their research from universities, and actually probably it's not even the universities that have sold it. The universities have transferred their know-how to what we call translational research entities, biotech companies, which have converted this academic idea into a process that can be applied, and typically with phase 1 and sometimes phase 2 data. And that's when big industries say, oh, we'll buy that, and buy the whole company as well. And huge amounts of money change place, but this is the process to make commercially viable products. So now, if our current partners are not, for the most of them, there are one or two that are, like I'll cite Biomanguinhos, with a very strong research ethos, a very strong research infrastructure within the Fiocruz institution. But for the most of them, they do not have this research infrastructure. So therefore, how are we going to ensure that these manufacturers get access to a portfolio of products that they can manufacture? And so what we are doing within this, and you'll be hearing in the rest of this afternoon about some of these, is the establishment of consortia to do product development, product-orientated research, leading to development. So this product-orientated research. Now these consortia, we've got a number of different ones you'll be hearing about, but they essentially are bringing together experienced translational research groups like the International Vaccine Institute in Korea, like Hillerman Laboratories in Singapore. We're also bringing in experienced universities like Chulalongkorn University in Thailand, like A-Star in Singapore. And it is this that we are trying to bring together to create this critical mass. At a recent meeting, we saw a picture of the Moderna researchers, and there were 5,000 researchers at their party. Now, how do you compete against 5,000 researchers? You'd say, well, I'm just a small manufacturer, I can't do this. But actually we can. Because 15 manufacturers, plus 15 times by 5 academic centers, which are the top of the world, now we can start building the critical mass that is necessary to ensure that the low and middle income countries, primarily middle here, will be able to receive a portfolio of ideas, a portfolio of products that have been taken to a certain point in development and then transferred over. So we need a bigger portfolio, and many of the partners, I think at least 13 of the 15, signed a memorandum of understanding along with WHO. We signed an MOU with Drew Weissman, the Nobel Prize winner for mRNA, at the University of Pennsylvania several months ago, to enable the university to provide to the partners assistance in, first of all, building research and development capacity, but also access to the portfolio of products coming out of this. Now, one university, they have a limited portfolio. It's a great portfolio. It includes things like sickle cell anemia, Mediterranean mesothelioma, I'm not even sure what that is. Lots and lots of things. But if we can now get this concept joined by other universities, we have Imperial College with Robin Shattock, who's working with some of our partners. We have, I made note of it. Who else do we have? We've got Sheffield University that is developing different ways of making RNA, working on this. So the main thing now is that we build these consortia. We get academic institutions that are saying, we've got this idea. We get these translational institutions to say, we can convert that idea into an SOP. And then the manufacturers can receive the SOPs and manufacture. So with Medicine's patent pool, this is going to be critical because each of these players also is saying, well, really, we'd like to be able to sell this to Roche and to Novartis to be able to pay our staff, etc. So this is where the devil's going to be in the detail of how do we get a license to this technology, and Charles will be discussing this later, while also ensuring that the inventors are able to generate revenue from the high income sources. So I think my conclusion is that each entity by itself will fail. All of us together will succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Let's now move online. Dr. Kiat for an overview of the Southeast Asia Consortia that Martin mentioned. Dr. Kiat is Professor of Medicine at Chula Vaccine Research Center at the School of Global Health in the Faculty of Medicine in Thailand. Dr. Kiat, you are online?
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Let me try.
Thank you
Hi,
for
everyone.
being with us.
Sorry I couldn't join in person. Yeah, let me share the slide and see how we can
Thank you.
further. Can you see the slide yet?
Not yet. Yes, coming up right now.
Okay. All right. Okay, my real pleasure joining the conference. So what I'm going to share with you is the update on what the current status of this Southeast Asia vaccine R&D consortia. Early of this year, so at Singapore, so we have a meeting, and then you probably most of you have seen the video, and then this is the key member of the consortium, and then here the 4 vaccine target that has been identified for Southeast Asia. So the first one is dengue, second one is a therapeutic HPV, the third is the malaria Plasmodium vivax, and the last is the enterovirus 71 and foot-and-mouth disease. I think we all know that there's a number of essential components to be successful for a consortium. Very clearly, we need a key leadership. We need very committed. We need researcher. We need a leading organization, assisting capacity, collaboration, pilot plan, or manufacturer partner, and funding. So funding is very critical. And the expected outcome, of course, we're going to see a number of proof of the concept vaccine candidate. And at least one, if we are lucky, at least one go to a GMP clinical lot and go for phase 1 trial. And of course, ideally, if we can, go to a late clinical development and for the licensure for global access, that our ultimate goal. Now, here is a very brief summary of the current status. So the dengue R&D leader by Chula VRC, the main funding is from the National Vaccine Institute Thailand, are the main funder. The current status is that we got a very promising immunogenicity of the tetravalent plus the consensus S1 antigen. And with this promising immunogenicity data, so we'll be able to convince NBI to further fund that for the transgenic mice challenge model and also the macaque challenge model. So we anticipate that by Q1 or Q2 next year, we will start the challenge study. The transgenic mice challenge model will be done at Drew Weissman lab, and primate trial challenge test will be done at the National Primate Center at Chulalongkorn University. The second therapeutic vaccine, this is therapeutic vaccine for HPV. The goal is to get rid of HPV DNA and also to treat the precancerous state, particularly SIN2, SIN3, to be normalized. The R&D leadership also made by the Chula VRC. The funding, we start by our seed money donated fund. Then later on, we got some funding from the UK South Asian WAC Hub in terms of our postdoc fellowship and some of the reagent. Now the data, both the immunogenicity and the challenge model in mice, very promising. So we have shown that either as a preventive, as a therapeutic vaccine to just given only one dose, be able to get rid of the HPV-related tumor cell, and also with this E7 or E6 plus E7 can also perform as a preventive vaccine when we give 2 doses before the tumor cell challenges. So the plan is we will try to have it entering phase 1 by Q2 or mid of 2026. The third one is the malaria VIVAX. This is led R&D by the Mahidol VIVAC Research Unit at the Mahidol University, Thailand. The main funder is from Japan, to the Global Health Innovative Technology, focusing mainly on malaria. Immunogenicity tests both in mice and in macaque, very promising, high immunogenicity. So the challenge model is not a challenge model. It's actually look at the in the inhibition of the transmission and also inhibition of the liver infection state, and we are going to put together to apply for the same funder to that they are able to fund up to phase clinical development. So we plan to have a clinical development by Q1 2027. And for enterovirus EV71, this is led by Professor Justin at NUS. We still couldn't get money, so we used our donated fund to start proof of the concept in mice. The preliminary data look good. We start to generate viral-like particle in this process. For those that might not know Chula VRC in brief, so we are academic vaccine research center. Our commitment is really to get this technology accessible in the low-mid-income country. We are a small group, but we really committed and with various experts of different diseases. And this is our R&D capacity. At this moment, we are about to fill up the gap of the small pilot plant of the RNA production, not only for vaccine, but also for therapeutic RNA. Now we have about if we not include COVID-19, we have at least 13 in the pipeline. Again, viruses, bacteria, parasite, and the therapeutics. And this is major funding for Chula VRC, so for various sources. Now, what we have learned from this consortium, I would say that there are a number of key success factors. I have mentioned a bit earlier, but I think commitment is a key. It's really a must. So leading and collaborating researcher, if we have that commitment, I think we be able to achieve it. Secondly, capacity and capability can be strengthened by collaboration. So I don't think one center, one organization alone will be able to do everything. Funding is very essential, but very tough to get it. Regular meeting is very critical. If we lack of this part, I think we will lose the track. Now, a number of key considerations if we really want to work as a regional consortium or even cross or trans-regional consortium is to have a strong regional vaccine R&D. I think we need to get a number of country government to join. We have to find a mechanism to convince them. At least Thailand is very clear that our funder will very support it. Secondly, the approach should be a collaborative and integrating the strength of committed member country rather than each country try to do everything. And I think we should, because we don't have that much of resources, like what we have heard from Martin, that all the R&D part of Moderna, they have more than 5,000 people. So I think we should seriously avoid redundancy, both within and outside the region. So this type of meeting, thinking together, working together, and try to share resources and funding, that will be important. I would like to urge more cross-regional collaborative approach if we want to really reach out, to reach the goal of global access. And we need to think differently from this current approach. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Professor Kiat. Now let me give the floor to Amin Khan, that is the Chief Science Advisor at Afrigen, to take us through innovation for sustainability initiatives at Afrigen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this very important meeting this week. And it's my pleasure to be here. It's often an excuse for me to visit Cape Town, a wonderful place to spend time, especially at this time of year. So let me, before I go into the slides, sort of share with you what I intend to talk about today. And I have a cheat sheet here simply because I'm jet lagged. I got off the plane last night from the USA. Now, many of the things that I'll talk about, you've heard already this morning, but I want to put in a slightly different context. But before I do that, what are the requirements for sustainability? They really fall into these categories that you've already heard about today: capability, capacity, and supply of raw materials, right? Technology platform, a product pipeline, regulatory authority, maturity, funding, and let's not forget, political support, right? Whether that is in the country or whether that's political support across boundaries, given the very divided world that we live in today, we think that is clearly very important. Now, I had the privilege of starting to work with Afrigen 2 years ago now, Petro sitting here in the front row. And I will tell you that at that time, we were essentially in the pandemic, right? And everybody was focused on realizing this mRNA platform and making it accessible across the LMIC partners that are represented here today. But I will tell you, even 2 years ago, as I started working with Afrigen, one of the first questions that Petra asked me, you may not remember this, was, Amin, we need to worry about sustainability. And the only way to do this is to think beyond COVID. So what are the things that we need to work on? What is the pipeline going to look like? So I'll talk a little bit about that a little later on today. So the tech transfer program was, as we all know, established in part, in a very significant part, to respond to this inequity in access and the belief that mRNA at the time was going to enable us to respond to the pandemic that was going on, obviously not realizing the extent and duration of the pandemic at the time. So the first few slides that I have here are really for context. I'll move through them very quickly because we all know the story and the background and why this platform is important for LMICs in Africa in particular. But then I want to move on to how Afrigen has been thinking about sustainability for more than 2 years now, and in its own way, whilst focus on building this mRNA platform and doing the tech transfer, preparing for addressing the sustainability question. So, okay, here we go. You've all seen this slide before, the contents of this slide. It's very obvious. I won't spend too much time going through it. But you see this great void in the middle of the map there, which is the African continent, where, as we all know, significant vaccine production does not occur. And I will tell you, having spent all of my career working in North America and Europe, that fact that is highlighted in red background for me when I started working with Afrigen was a big surprise. That less than 1% of the vaccines that are used on the African continent are actually produced on the continent. And those that are, is typically the fill finish that is done on the African continent. So the true technology, not to minimize fill finish, of course, that's very important, but production of the antigens themselves has not been transferred to the African continent. And we all know this is a slide that shows the vaccine supply, the procurement from Gavi. And you don't have time to look at the details there. I'm sure you've seen the report. But the key is that most of the supply, as I said, comes from outside of Africa. And it is notable. There are two things that I want to point out here. One is if you look at the production from the Serum Institute of India, yes, developing country vaccine manufacturer, it accounts for the large majority of the supply to the African continent. First thing. And the second point that I want to point out here, that slim line on yellow fever, you see it in the third row there. What is that? That's the Institute of Pasteur in Dakar, right? It's for yellow fever vaccine. Which, by the way, is one target that is accessible for mRNA technology platform. And there hasn't been significant discussion around that, although I saw on a number of slides earlier today that yellow fever is mentioned. And potentially, one could develop a yellow fever vaccine using mRNA technology relatively easily in the grand scheme of things. When I saw this, I had two reactions. This is from the African Union, and the objective to target to produce 60% of the vaccines for use on the African continent in African countries by 2040. This is laudable. And having spent my career doing research and development, and half of that career designing, developing, and launching vaccines, again, in the Northern Hemisphere, I was taken aback by this, wondering how is this going to be achieved? Because most of that you saw from the previous slide comes from legacy vaccines. And most of those legacy vaccines, there is a significant reluctance to apply new technologies to redevelop those vaccines. So how is this going to be achieved? Again, I'm just asking the question. In my mind, as I think through this, it's easy for me to see all of the hurdles that have to be overcome in getting there. But what I do know is that for new vaccines, mRNA is going to play a very, very important role. And here it is, again, from one of the publications from, I think it's from the African Union, CDC. Here are all the technology platforms, and for reasons that were mentioned earlier, I think Martin Frieda mentioned some of this earlier today. The most versatile of the technology, once fully developed, and I hasten to add here that what we see here today with approved mRNA vaccines is first generation mRNA vaccines. And the development of the technology continues, and I'll come back to that a little later on. But certainly mRNA gives us the opportunity to apply a platform across a broad area of targets, not only vaccines for infectious diseases, but for therapeutics as well. I don't need to spend too much time here talking about the characteristics of the mRNA platform that will allow us to do this. Suffice it to say that one can get from an idea to a product that can be tested in the clinic much more rapidly. We certainly saw that with SARS-CoV-2, right? There are other challenges that mRNA technology overcomes, not only in terms of speed, but also the breadth of application, provided one has a clear idea of what the antigen target needs to look like. And RNA technology as a whole, the focus has been on mRNA of one kind or another here. But I want to remind you that RNA has been utilized in products for more than 30 years now. In fact, if you look at the products that have been approved that utilize RNA of one kind or another, of the 20 plus products that are approved around the globe, the large majority of them are not vaccines. Okay? They are for genetic diseases, and a growing number of targets now looking beyond genetic diseases. So the point that I want to make here is when you build the platform around nucleic acid manufacturing technology, which is what mRNA is, you can expand that beyond mRNA and look at other applications. Some of them are shown here. Therapeutics for human health, crop protection, animal health. So it provides a versatile set of tools that can be applied broadly. I won't spend too long going through this slide here. Karen did a wonderful job showing you the roadmap for Afrigen to where it is today. There's one thing that I want to emphasize. Well, maybe two things. First, Afrigen is going to be GMP ready certainly within the next year, and hopefully within the next 6 to 9 months. Okay? What Karen didn't dwell on too much, and I want to point out, having been a vaccine R&D person and looking at what Afrigen has done through that lens over the last 2 years that I've been associated with Afrigen, is take the inherent talent that exists in scientists here in Cape Town and infuse that with an understanding of how to do vaccine research and development. First, through the experience with SARS-CoV-2, what does it mean to develop a preclinical candidate? What are the critical success criteria for various stages of development during that preclinical stage? How do you think about clinical supply and supporting clinical development beyond that initial phase? And Afrigen scientists continue to learn how to do this. And beyond the SARS-CoV-2 program, have initiated early stage programs that I will speak about very quickly in a minute. Nothing to add here except to say this network represents possible access to 3 billion people, almost half of the global population. And as already has been mentioned, not only by Martin, but Kiat as well, is that to succeed here, there has to be collaboration across this network. So if partners are interested in common targets, let's pool our resources, let's pool our understanding. We cannot afford to compete with each other across this network. And it is critical that the business models get established and there is agreement to make sure that we can do this. And Afrigen, I will tell you, and I don't mean to embarrass you, Petra, here, Petro has really had a very open mind about how to do this. Access for all. Let's figure out what is a win-win. That is what we have to continue to focus on. Now, many of you have seen this slide before. It's been shown in multiple forums. It continues to evolve. I don't want to spend too much time here. Certainly on the left-hand side, I think the opportunities are very well known to all. I want to spend a few minutes on the column on the right, the challenges. Because as I mentioned, mRNA technology today, what we see with the approved products, and as a reminder, those are the COVID products, both conventional mRNA and self-amplifying RNA products that have been approved, and the boosters. Also, the RSV product that was approved earlier this year, which is a Moderna mRNA product. Okay? So essentially 2 products that have been approved so far using first-generation technologies, and some of the challenges that have to be overcome here are listed here. First, we have to better understand immunology, nucleic acid immunology, because it is not only the duration of protection, we know this from COVID, we know this from RSV, from the approved products. The duration of protection is relatively short. At least the antibody response wanes very, very quickly. But there are other challenges as well, especially for vaccines that are going to be given chronically, multiple doses over many years. There is a type switching of the antibody response, and the implications of that are not yet fully understood. There is optimism across the industry, especially very learned immunologists, that that is going to be overcome somehow, okay? So that is another issue that has to be addressed for the second generation technology. The other point that I want to point out here is LNPs, stabilization, room temperature stability, or at least 4 degrees C stability. I used to be optimistic, at least until about 8-9 months ago, that we will be able to stabilize LNPs to give us 2 to 8 degrees C stable product. Moderna, BioNTech, they continue to work on this, Pfizer, and they've improved the stability profile for LNPs. Are we ever going to get to a 2 to 8 degree stable product? I'm not so sure anymore. Okay. Furthermore, and it's also mentioned in one of the presentations earlier today, LNPs are not the holy grail. Okay. It works in first generation technology. But there are technologies that are now developing and evolving, which may actually obviate the need for LNPs. We may have other approaches to delivering mRNA with greater potency, with more stability. Right? And these are important considerations as we think about sustainability of this platform and as we think about the work that Afrigen are doing. And here it is. This is the way Afrigen has been looking to how to assure sustainability over a longer time horizon. These are the elements. It's not my intent to go through the details here, but I'll show you a few examples of how we're looking at this at Afrigen. From manufacturing technology and how to improve it, formulation research and alternative delivery go hand in hand. How can you improve the existing formulations? How can you look at alternative methods of delivery to enhance potency, stability, etc.? And then how can you optimize the manufacturing processes, whether it's looking at the DNA starting material or how can you optimize the sequences for your mRNA? And of course, we need a pipeline. So again, you may have seen this slide before. We looked at this very early on, and we looked at these areas, and Petro was driving this quite significantly. We looked at each one of these areas, and we scoured the globe to see where we would be able to get access to emerging technologies, so we can not only catch up with where the innovators are, Moderna, BioNTech, Pfizer, now Sanofi as well. Not only do we need to catch up with them, but is there an opportunity to leapfrog them? Right. The innovators often get left behind in that race because they are so invested in their existing technology that they may not invest enough in how to update it. So this is a real opportunity for us. And this is a well-established paradigm that has been studied over decades. So for us, it's keeping an eye on this landscape to see where are the next groundbreaking innovations going to come from. Can we partner with those entities early on to make sure that we have the inside lane when it comes to winning that race? In terms of manufacturing technology, and only one is represented here, we all know about Quantum, early collaboration with Univercells and their Quantum platform, and many partners are working with this technology at Afrigen. We have this technology available. It will go into the GMP suite in the near future, but we're not only looking at Quantum, we're looking at optimizing the conventional IVT reactions and beyond. And here is the announcement for the collaboration with Quantum. There are a couple of things that I want to point out here. Quantum, and they have data to show this. It's not a very large body of data, but they have data that shows that their manufacturing process is construct agnostic. So it doesn't matter what the sequence is, you'll get the same quality and productivity out of their manufacturing platform. Now, I hope this will turn out to be the case as we apply this more broadly across various targets. But this is a very important piece. And the other obvious point here is that partnership with Afrigen to utilize this technology platform to building a pipeline. If you look at the DNA piece here, this shows the partnership with Synjoy to look at moving away from E. coli-based DNA starting material. And in fact, so that's Synjoy, that collaboration is ongoing. We also have a collaboration with Yale University, with Professor Wendy Gilbert, to actually look at the UTRs in the mRNA construct to see if there are things that we can do to enhance the potency of the constructs that we deliver, and two, to make sure that we're going to have freedom to operate. And these are being included in our programs in the research phases of our work. And again, this was announced earlier this year, the CEPI grant for the speed production, speed initiative, which is to shorten the cycle time to get from sequence to DNA starting material. And this is well underway right now in our collaboration with Synjoy. Now, this slide is a very popular slide, as you've seen it at least once before today. And so what are the disease targets? Now, this is from our meeting in April last year, and Pierre put this slide together. It's a little bit out of date now, but we saw many of the same targets from our partners during the discussions today. The intent here was to make sure that we have a good understanding of what is the pull for targets across the network, and to make sure that there'll be opportunity to collaborate. Now, inset here, and in the next slide I'll show this. Very early on, actually, as I mentioned, Petro asked this question about what does the pipeline look like? And we did a comprehensive analysis 2 years ago now. And the output of that is shown very simplistically in this spreadsheet on the right-hand side. Yeah, on the right-hand side, where we looked at a variety of areas for evaluation, mRNA applicability to particular targets. I'm not going to go through the details, but you can see them listed here in terms of, do we know the antigen? Will mRNA likely be successful? How complicated is the development path, not only from a CMC point of view, but from a clinical development, regulatory development standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. And importantly, are there opportunities for funding, and so on and so forth. So, this analysis exists. We update it from time to time, and if anybody wants to have a detailed discussion about this, feel free to ask. But essentially what we've come up with is a short list of targets beyond TB and HIV, and we have selected RSV, gonorrhea, and Rift Valley fever. And all of these are in preclinical development now at Afrigen. I'll highlight one of those. It's the gonorrhea project, and I will tell you that I was very skeptical about this when we originally did this analysis. Fortunately for us, Evaxion, a Danish company, using their artificial intelligence approach, actually identified some novel antigen targets for gonorrhea. Surprised me. These were not the kinds of antigens that I would have expected. Nevertheless, we have a collaboration with Evaxion where they have provided these antigen targets for us at Afrigen, and in fact, we have now demonstrated preclinical proof of concept in an animal model. And on the next slide, it shows, the extent of this collaboration. Essentially, we're including the collaboration with Yale, access to lipids from two entities potentially, the Evaxion collaboration, and at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, that's where Sanjay Ram, who is an expert in gonorrhea, has an animal model for testing these, and of course our intent is to utilize Quantum. What I want to point out here is, the dollar goes very far in Africa. I can tell you that I would not have been able to do this and brought it along to proof of concept with this kind of funding if I was in the US, okay? So the dollar goes very far, and we have preclinical proof of concept at this point in time. And, the fundraising, we need resources for clinical development, and we're hopeful that over the next few months that we'll be in a position to announce some funding associated with this project that will take us to phase 1 clinical testing. Now, what about delivery? I'm not going to talk extensively about this. I just want to show you one opportunity here. And this is our collaboration with QuadMed in South Korea. This is essentially non-invasive delivery of a vaccine, and with IVI, of course. And this collaboration is very straightforward. We're using SARS-CoV-2 as a test antigen, and they will formulate this into their microarray patches to be tested preclinical to demonstrate proof of concept. What I want to hasten to add here is that microarray patches have been used for other technology platforms. Numerous proof of concept studies have demonstrated that they work for influenza, for example. I believe that for mRNA, they may have greater versatility because mRNA, you're delivering essentially the same material every time that you do this. So it might enable this platform to have greater utility for an mRNA approach. So, that is ongoing, but this is one example of delivery. Now, the other things I want to point out while this slide is up is that we have been talking to numerous companies, and there are two in particular that I've mentioned, Certest and Genevant, where we have agreements to utilize their novel ionizable lipids for applications in the portfolio. And our intent is to continue to utilize SM102 as our gold standard in preclinical testing. This is the ionizable lipid that's in the Moderna vaccine. But once we've defined a candidate and we want to move to readiness for phase 1 and doing preclinical toxicology studies, we will have access to a lipid that has demonstrated clinical safety, and we will utilize that to make sure that we will have freedom to operate as we go into the clinic. Now, I'm not going to talk about freedom to operate. We all know how complex that landscape is, and believe me, it's getting more complicated. We're seeing lawsuits occur frequently. Here, I just want to point out that the MPP is doing a wonderful job in monitoring this landscape and keeping us informed of what's going on, and the resources available to all of us, of course. And the only other thing that I want to say here is we are very keenly interested in freedom to operate and making sure that we navigate this landscape very, very carefully at Afrigen. Now, in terms of sustainability, you can see there's a growing number of entities in what I would call the LMICs that are focused on mRNA. I don't think this slide really shows all of them, but there's a growing number. And I'm hopeful that through collaboration and partnership that these will be strengthened and that we will be able to build this network, which quite frankly, without which we will not be able to compete with the big players who have much deeper pockets than the combined network, despite what Martin said earlier in terms of resources. But this isn't it, right? What about beyond vaccines? as I said, 50% or more of the products that are RNA-based are not for vaccines, right? And if you have expertise in nucleic acid manufacturing, you can begin to look at these other approaches, aptamers, antisense oligos, interfering RNA, et cetera, and look at how these are being applied. In the therapeutic area, those applications are more mature. They were initially applied to indications, genetic indications, orphan diseases, etc., to essentially establish the technologies, but now they're being applied more broadly. My point here is very simple, and that is we've essentially established the manufacturing platform. We need to continue our eye on where the new developments are coming and not miss them. We have to be party to them. So we can get to the second generation as quickly, if not quicker, than the big players. But at the same time, we have to keep an eye on the future, because these platforms can be applied beyond infectious diseases, and we have to plant those seeds today. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I want to thank everybody who's been associated with this in providing this wonderful, very broad support for this program, and in particular for Afrigen. Thank you.
Thank you, Amin. And let me move now to Dr. Ntusi, CEO and President of the South African Medical Research Council, that will talk about South African efforts to improve research and development. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can I just say how much of a pleasure it has been being part of today's meeting, and really, really enjoyed this program. So as one of the largest funders in the African region, I thought I would talk a little bit about our approach to fueling health research, not just in South Africa, but in the region. And we do this largely through the partnerships that we build. These are partnerships that are built on shared values, a shared sense of ethics, and are not just merely transactional, but really recognize the strength that each partner brings to the collaboration. So I'd like to start just by briefly reading this history statement from the SAMRC, where we acknowledge our historical complicity in the existing disparities in health in this country, and commit ourselves to the continued promotion of justice and dignity in health. These are my disclosures. And why is it important that the fueling of science and research on the African continent should matter? It matters because Africa, with a population of 1.4 billion people, makes up about 15% of the world's population. It represents not just the youngest population in the world with a median age of 19, but the fastest growing population with a global proportion of the global burden of disease of about 25 to 30%, and yet only accounts for less than 1% of the expenditure on healthcare. We're also a very rich continent. We have 60% of the world's arable lands and huge deposits of minerals. Yet we produce less than 2% of the world's research output, less than 3% of the world's GDP, and account for less than 3% of the world's international trade. So the SAMRC is a statutory organ of state, an entity of the National Department of Health that was established with the goal of building a healthy nation through research, innovation, and transformation. And what do? We house a intramural program that conducts the kind of research that cannot be conducted in universities. And then in universities, we establish centers of excellence as well as funding individual researchers. We invest substantially in capacity development, taking a pipeline approach from postgraduate students to early and mid-career scientists as well as senior scientists. And then importantly, we house the innovation platform for health in the country, and I'll come back to speak a bit about this. And we also run a very efficient and competent research grants administration and management program. And of course, all of this work is underpinned by the partnerships that we build. And so if you look to the right of this slide, that really, encircled in red is the engine of the approach to fueling research in the region. We have strategic research initiatives, grants, innovation, and product development platforms, as well as research capacity development programs. And Michelle Mulder and her team lead this entire endeavor. And so in terms of our grants, innovation, and product development, we have strategic projects, some grant programs that are well established, strategic funding partnerships, and on the innovation side, we focus through the entire value chain, from supporting people with exciting ideas to development of prototypes and ultimately technology transfer, and hopefully taking them down the commercialization pathway. So I think in terms of the grants and innovation development programs that we lead, this can be thought of in two ways. And I'm grateful to Michelle Mulder for these slides and this thinking. So we can organize them in terms of the priority areas, which include infections, non-communicable diseases, maternal, neonatal, and child health, as well as the impact of climate change on health, understanding digital health and AI applications, and of course, health systems. But perhaps a more useful way of looking at them is to look at cross-cutting domains. And so we've got a very strong interest in supporting drug discovery, clinical trials, vaccines, medical devices, precision medicine, and of course, being part of and leading funders forum. And in terms of the value chain in the medical device space, we work with key partners all the way from ideation to market introduction. I won't say much about the work we do on vaccines because Michelle will speak about that. But we also have a strong interest in indigenous knowledge systems and how we work with scientists in different institutions, from discovery of plants with therapeutic potential all the way to market introduction. And in terms of our strategic health innovative partnerships, I think their projects are worth highlighting. These include supporting work on novel BCG vaccines for tuberculosis, using AI platforms to improve sexual and reproductive health, using recombinant enzymes for mRNA vaccine manufacture that we support, amongst others. And one of the programs that we're quite excited about is the 110K Human Genome Project, which aims to develop a South Africa-specific population genome program that will use the existing joint ecosystem and allow us to develop a scaled genomics program to sequence 100,000 South Africans, and it's planned to occur over 2 phases, a pilot of 10,000 genomes, and then the full project over 100,000 genomes. And the current status is that we've been able, via the Department of Science and Innovation to secure funding for the pilot phase, and are now starting to map out the work to see this through. Another important partnership for us has been with the Gates Foundation and other partner networks through the Grand Challenges program. And over the last 10 years, we've run a number of really important and impactful calls. There are a number of really exciting future programs that are planned, and the SAMRC plays a really important part in this program of Grand Challenges, and has been instrumental in helping other African countries to set up their own Grand Challenges programs. We have a number of key strategic initiatives. These include with the MRC in the UK, NRS in France, the NIH and Fogarty in the US, KfW, the German Development Bank, which is helping us to procure infrastructure and equipment for vaccine development in South Africa, USAID, as well as AMED in Japan. An important initiative that I think is worth highlighting is our relationship with the Chen Sunxiong Family Foundation, which allows us to be able to find interns. These interns are people who are qualified with BScs and MScs who are unemployed, to train them in our facilities at the SAMRC and in our partner universities, and then be able to link them with absorption into employment in the market. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we host the Innovation Hub for Health for South Africa, and this is work that's done with a number of key partners, and includes the entire value chain in the innovation space. And then finally, I think it's important to highlight the key role that we play in building partnerships with funders, and we host the Funders Forum that Richard Gordon runs, where we have all of the people who fund health research on the African continent, including MPP, ELMA, and a number of other partners are present in today's meeting. And so by building these partnerships, we are able to leverage the minimum investment from the South African government to be able to have quite substantial regional and global impact. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ntuzi. And now let me give the floor to Dr. Michelle Multler, the Executive Director for the Grants, Innovation and Product Development at the South African MRC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thanks for this opportunity. So I'm going to talk more generally about the SAMVAC Consortium, the South African mRNA Vaccine Consortium. I apologize to the scientists in the room from the SAMVAC Consortium because I'm going to talk a little bit high level and I'm not going to do justice to the wonderful science that you've been doing. I just want to set the scene first with this little bit of background about South Africa. So we have a very strong research base in South Africa with a number of publicly funded institutions, universities and science councils, many of which are really quite research intensive. Our last measured spend on R&D overall in the country was about $2 billion US, which is only about 6.62% of GDP. Although this is the highest in Africa, it is very low by global standards. So we're still not spending enough generally on R&D in the country in all sectors. We do have growing tech, biotech, and manufacturing sectors, but it's important to point out that we still have a significant reliance on imports. And this is particularly important in the health space, where if you look at the medical devices sector, 90% of the value of medical devices used in the country are imported. And if you look at the production of pharmaceuticals, 98% of the APIs that are used in drug formulation in South Africa are imported. So the other important fact, which we are hoping to change this whole initiative, is that South Africa has never developed and brought to market a vaccine, a human vaccine to date. And we have not as yet, as far as I'm aware, ever manufactured drug substance locally for commercial use. And that, again, is why we're here today and why this whole consortium and program exists. So we've had this intention for many, many years, more than 2 decades, to get to this point. And a lot of investment has gone in, a lot of political will, and a lot of effort has gone into reaching this goal. But it's only really when COVID hit that the urgency really kicked in, and we've had a lot now new impetus that is driving us now towards this goal. So what we are working on at the moment is really building on historical investments. So this started, there was a lot of research already happening, but it really gained critical mass back in 1999 with the South African AIDS Vaccine Initiative. This was an initiative of the South African government, was led by the MRC, and it was really the first time that we coordinated the efforts around, and particularly in this case, HIV vaccine development. So all of those areas that are shown there on your right, were addressed through this. So it was quite a holistic program for the HIV vaccine, the actual vaccine development, building clinical infrastructure, the ethics research, and so on. It did actually lead to the development of 2 local HIV vaccine candidates that made it into phase 1 trials. But most importantly, what it did was to build this capacity. I keep using the wrong one. Build this capacity here for vaccine development, immunology, preclinical testing, clinical trials, community engagement, and then the ethics and behavioral research. This was followed by the Strategic Health Innovation Partnerships Program, which was mentioned by Prof. Ntuzi. This is an initiative funded by the Department of Science and Innovation, again hosted by the MRC, aimed at product development. And so SHIP has been, for the last 10 years or so, also investing in vaccine development, again mostly in the HIV space, and also a lot of investment in preclinical capacity, immunology, and clinical studies. And then alongside that, there's been a lot of investments by the DSI through their other agencies like TIER, NRF, and others in building infrastructure, platforms, and so on. And one such example is PCDDP at Northwest University, and Rose is here, and they're part of our consortium. And then also during COVID, of course, we had a large impetus and a very big program, very much funded from government, but also from other philanthropic funders, to build research and innovation capacity specifically for COVID, but again, that's now been applicable more broadly beyond that. So what we've done is to leverage all of that. We're talking about 20 years of investment, capacity development in all different areas, and we then joined the bid from Afrogen and BioVac to the WHO and MPP to host this tech transfer hub. Very pleased that Afrogen and BioVac were successful in this and brought us along. But really where we play a role is in the Objective 3. So we are driving the development program, and this, although you've heard a lot about what Afrogen's doing on sustainability, but we also see this as really the key to sustainability of the mRNA tech transfer hub, is that we build this pipeline of products that can be manufactured in future, not just in South Africa, but in the other hubs as well. So the consortium, Objective 3 is really being driven by the South African mRNA Vaccine Consortium. These are diagrams put together by Wits and others. A slightly complicated diagram, but the bottom line is we've got 10 organizations. The last one is just joining us now, that's the CSIR, and they are all involved in the full value chain, from identifying the immunogens all the way down to hopefully soon going into the clinic. This is just another way of depicting the different components. So we have just slightly outside the whole program, but as part of SAMVAC, we have a disease surveillance component. So we're still funding the Network for Genomic Surveillance. And that is very important for us in ensuring that we keep a handle on any emerging threats and potential new vaccines that we should be looking at, but also that we are understanding the circulating variants, so we are putting the best immunogens into these vaccine candidates. And that includes the genomic surveillance, but as well as wastewater surveillance, which is a program led at the MRC. We also have a program at the Biofoundry at Stellenbosch University, looking to develop recombinant strains that can produce the 9 enzymes that are involved in mRNA production. And this is again towards self-sustainability, so that we're not reliant always on bringing in those material inputs from outside. And then the main component, obviously, is the vaccine development. So we have immunogen and antigen design. We have the mRNA platform itself, which has been developed by WITS, but is continually being improved. We have novel lipid carriers that are being developed also at WITS. We have a substantial immunology program, also built over many, many years. And this is important for, obviously, the preclinical and later the clinical testing of these vaccines. And then on the other side, we have the preclinical capacity. So as soon as we get candidates which we feel are ready to move towards clinical, we have PCDDP at Northwest University, and we've been funding them through this consortium to develop the framework and the workflow so that they can be fully GLP compliant, and also to do a pilot GLP tox study in parallel with the Afrigen vaccine to show that they can get the same results as the international groups. We obviously, through Objective 1, have access to Afrigen's now soon to be GMP accredited facilities for manufacture of clinical batches. And then the MRC has developed substantial capability to run and coordinate big multi-center trials. And we did a lot of that during COVID, and we'll be leading the clinical trials in the RNA Hub program. So these are the current targets. COVID has been deprioritized, but we're mostly working on HIV, TB, and then Afrigen on Rift Valley fever. So we've raised around $9 million to date with assistance from MPP and WHO, and that is all fully committed. So we're currently on the next fundraising drive to get to the next phase of the program. Just a shout out to the funders. So these are the funders of the SAMVAC consortium. We have those who are funding directly into Objective 3, and then those funders which MPP has raised funding from and is collectively organized, which are also feeding into the SAMVAC program. So this is a slide that very much mirrors what Karen presented earlier. Maybe we should coordinate our slides, but this is really showing the ecosystem and all the players. And it's, again, something that Prof. Ntuzi had presented a little bit earlier. But what we've built over the many years and hopefully cementing through SAMVAC is this full pipeline with all the players feeding in. And the capabilities feeding in at the relevant places. And then alongside that, again, Prof. Ntuzi mentioned the CSSF program, which is hopefully building the manufacturing workforce, but also the vaccine R&D workforce. And then we are working with the Department of Science and Innovation and KfW and the German government to actually fund infrastructure development for vaccine development and manufacture. So just to finish off, some highlights to date. So the WITS group under Patrick Arbuthnot has been developing the mRNA backbone and demonstrated proof of concept with the COVID immunogen, and that's now being used for HIV and TB. Afrigen is working with some of their partners on the Rift Valley fever, and these are now in various stages of preclinical testing. We are busy planning a non-human primate study on the HIV candidates for early next year, and Afrigen is busy and working very hard with UCT and others on developing the process now for the TB vaccine candidates, with a view to those going into first-in-human studies. We have another group at Wits University led by Charles de Koning, which is looking at novel ionizable lipids from natural sources. And they have developed a whole series of these lipids that have been shown to form LMPs of the right size and to effectively and efficiently encapsulate and deliver mRNA. So those are being developed further. We have a group from UCT SIBA, and I think Thanos is here as well, who are looking at process development, process improvements, and they already have a number of nice results around how to improve efficiencies, reduce costs, and increase yields. I mentioned the preclinical tox, and then I also mentioned the Stellenbosch University Biofoundry. They've now completed proof of concept with 2 of the enzymes and are working on the other 7, and those are now moving to scale up at CSIR, but also with one of their partners, Flora Biotech. And again, just finishing with the same statement from the MRC, and thank you to everybody for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Maldel. Now, Charles, last presentation of this session.
Thank you very much indeed, Claudia. It's a joy to be with you all and being the last presentation. So while I'm talking, because I'll probably bore you, I want you to be thinking about comments to make during the discussion session that's going to follow. And that's really important. It's particularly aimed at our funders and journalists. If you have questions or comments on where the program is and what we've done so far with it. But I'm going to talk about something that I'm not sure that we consider that much. At the beginning of this program, WHO asked us to support them in supporting the program because of our expertise around licensing and legal agreements around licensing. But it wasn't just that. So my day job, if you like, is to go out to big pharmaceutical companies and ask them for licenses on their patented products that we can then sub-license to generic manufacturers in order to get affordable medical products into LMICs. So you've seen this slide several times now. You know, there was a lot of areas that the program partners wanted to collaborate on, which is great in terms of R&D. And we then got some funding from Germany to look at the clinical trials for mRNA vaccines that are currently in development. And this is maybe a little bit small, but the ones highlighted in yellow are the ones that the program partners have said they're interested in. And then the ones at the top that have got an orange bar with numbers in it are what's in clinical development by Big Pharma, or relatively Big Pharma. And 78% of these candidates are being done by just 6 companies. And as you can see, the 5,000 people at Moderna are quite busy. The numbers don't exactly match because there may be more clinical trials than there are vaccine candidates, because the vaccine candidates may have more than one indication. It might be for children as well as adults or whatever it might happen to be. So also there are quite a lot of things that, even if they're not in clinical trials at the moment, are in preclinical. So what's left, there are almost certainly going to be other vaccines using other platforms. So what has been said here is that there will be a lot of competition. And R&D is not easy, nor is it generally quick. In many respects, we're incredibly lucky with COVID that it's a relatively simple pathogen to develop antigens for. If you look at where we are with an HIV vaccine and how long it's taken us to get to where we are, you know that some of these pathogens are very, very tricky. So what I'm saying is maybe R&D is definitely a really important way forward. It's really important for the African continent. It's really important for LMICs generally. But there may be other ways that we need to think about in terms of having sustainability. And I think, Herman, you mentioned acting as a CDMO. So that is one possibility. But there's also the possibility of in-licensing things from other, from academia, from pharma companies, from biotech, that may be another way of finding sustainable models to generate income while the R&D is ongoing. And so typically what we do, as I say in my day job, is we negotiate these licenses that are they're very bespoke generally. And obviously tech transfer can be a part of this. Now, there was an article that came out a little while ago and talked about, I think, I can't remember the exact word, something like buckets of money that we were getting, MPP. Sadly, we didn't exactly get buckets of money. The idea of a bucket is so great, isn't it? You just dip your hand in when you need a bit more. But we did get significant funding from France around tech transfer, because, which has been very useful for the program, but also it was much bigger than that. It wasn't just about the program. It was about setting up a tech transfer team, because increasingly, if you license something in, as let's say a therapeutic, it's more likely to be some kind of biologic, a more complex molecule. It's one thing to license in some very simple ARV, which has happened a lot in the past, where generic companies can reverse engineer it. They don't even need a tech pack or anything. You start talking about monoclonals and even more complex technologies, and you need tech transfer as well. There's no point actually just having a license on the patent. And so we realized we needed to integrate this into our model. And so that's sort of what we'll be doing going forward. And so my kind of proposal is that we would be there to support you around the in-licensing, and also doing our own work to look at things that could be in-licensed for you all. Now, clearly, it depends on what the product is, and it may be that, only a couple of you are interested in it, whatever. But we're always in the situation when we do an in-license of trying to calculate what is a sustainable number of manufacturers for anything. And in COVID, we went overboard because we had no idea what was going to happen with COVID. And the worst thing you can be in, the worst situation you can be in, is you don't have enough manufacturing capacity during a pandemic. But generally, we try and keep it relatively small so that there's enough market for everyone, and at the same time, you don't lead to stockouts and so on. And so we support both the licensors and the licensees. And the key kind of features of our licenses are around being transparent, non-exclusive, wide scope. They need to be complementary to other mechanisms that may be happening, because we do not want to, in any sense, deprive countries of rights that they have through licensing. That's very important. If you look at, there's a recent license from Gilead for a potentially incredibly important HIV prevention drug, in which they actually do remove the ability for, they effectively hamper countries from doing what they're allowed to do under TRIPS agreements. And then obviously, as I said, they're bespoke. So we try and always tailor the license to the product, the situation globally in terms of health. Obviously, we've got to take into account what the licensor is prepared to give us, whether we've got a market for the licensees, but most of all, public health. Are we improving public health? That's a great answer. So if you think about R&D, which is fantastic, I would just suggest to you that you don't rely on it. You know, you can get really unfortunate setbacks. And as Karen very truthfully said this morning, you know, there have been moments when Afrigen were blocked. They got through them, but you're likely to get to things like that may delay you, that may delay you a lot. And it's about thinking about the holistic approach to how you can make sure that your company is sustainable, because it's going to be a disaster if when the next pandemic comes, you're not, at least 75% of you are not there. And we'd love you all to be there. But really, if we're left with one company for the next pandemic, then we've kind of failed. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Let's give another round of applause for our speakers during this session. And as Charles announced, finally, you patiently listened throughout the day to the progresses and thinking of our partners on this program. Now it's really time to open the discussion. What do you think about the progress made so far? Charles was singling out our donors and journalists that are present here. We have a lot of colleagues connected online. Gelise and Olivier will help us with questions online. But really a reflection on what you have seen throughout the day and your advices, your thinking on how to strengthen this program even further for this sustainability in the future. And Martin, do you want to come with us here with me and Charles just to get the discussion going, break the ice, and...
So I would actually just like to begin with something. So Shelley, you showed the consortium as kind of being at the side, but I was there when we were reviewing the applications. So I'd like to put it down. Why was South Africa selected to host the hub? And it was the strength of having BioVac, a manufacturer, of having Afrigen, which was seen as being a translational research entity. But other countries also had a manufacturer. They could have pulled together a translational research entity. But it was the fact that there was also a very strong research environment that really led to the selection by an independent committee to say it is South Africa. There were others, and we could argue we could have chosen an American consortium. But what's the point of that? The Americans already were making mRNA vaccines. So Shelley, it was very, very much that combination of the universities, the know-how at the universities, the research, linked to the translational capacity, linked to the manufacturing capacity. So the entire ecosystem was there. And it is building this entire ecosystem that we see necessary going forward. But that ecosystem must also go beyond mRNA. mRNA is one technology. But we also need technologies to make monoclonal antibodies. We need technologies to make immune modulators. We need technologies to be thinking about Alzheimer's. What was I saying again? I forgot now. Anyway, so I really want to emphasize that it was this ecosystem that led to South Africa being nominated. And it is thanks to this ecosystem that we have made the progress that we have made, and we are sitting here today to discuss it. Thank you.
So, Gelise, do you have anything? Not so far. Good. Any question?
Here we have.
Okay. Anban.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank MPP for the great work that's being done. I also want to thank all the presenters today. I am really amazed and inspired by the progress that's been done. I think someone with little technical expertise, I feel like I finally grasp the complexity of what is trying to be accomplished by the program. But I also see how much has been accomplished in such a short time span. So I want to congratulate you all for everything you have done. I have to say that Canada is very happy to be funding MPP. It goes without saying. I feel the value added of this initiative is just instrumental, and it's really a great pleasure to be the donor and to be able to speak to how great this is. I do have two questions. Of course, my first question is about gender. So, as Charles alluded to earlier, Canada is quite keen to see gender representation, and throughout the day, a lot of the speakers, either through their presentations or in the photos that they share, we see quite a good balance of gender. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to the intentionality behind it, how you get that kind of representation, and also if you can speak to the retention piece of it. And my second question is also about retention, but more about the knowledge retention. A lot of the trainings are catered for specific participants, and I'm wondering over time how that can be sustained to make sure that nothing is lost over time. That's my. Thank you so much.
Why do I feel I'm being Have you noticed the majority of the African presenters today were women? I mean, sorry, but you're valuable. Firstly, Canada, thank you. You have seen how, the funding and support that we have received from you through MPP and then, of course, for the program, so greatly acknowledged. In South Africa, it's easy to have a female-dominated biosector. We are very privileged. We have a very strong female component in the biosciences sector. So African is 63% women, and our top management is very female-dominated, but a great diversity. In terms of retention, that's part of our challenges. Firstly, we cannot compete with salaries that's paid in the global north for these incredibly valuable knowledge base that's been built in South Africa. I think Amin alluded to it, Karen alluded to it. We've dived deep because we had to de novo develop with our university partners. We've built incredible knowledge base around mRNA. And as Amin also said, we innovate around it, not only for freedom to operate, but for public health purposes. So our people are incredibly precious. So how do we retain them? We have to create an environment where they're stimulated, where they're motivated, where they are valued, and where they have space to experiment, to learn, to innovate. But at the same time transfer to absolute strict quality management system in GMP. That's very, very precious. So that's the one thing. We are making opportunities available for our people to be trained, to learn, to develop. We do sign contracts with people to retain them for a period of time after a training period. We don't believe in restraint of trades because of many reasons. But I think ultimately we have to create a sustainable environment where people want to be, where they're valued, and where they can excel. We are losing people to the global north, and we will probably continue to do so. But we will also continue to build the skills, to grow, and to develop them. And I don't know whether anyone else wants to add. My sense is all the partners in the LMICs will have similar challenges.
And at that point, the value of the ecosystem that Martin was mentioned comes into play, because if we can offer young researchers the possibility to move around the various institutions and grow professionally, this helps with the retention, at least at the national level. So there is a question online. Do you want to read it? Or? So I can read. Charles' presentation, a very important point on sustainability. Did MPP already identify potential mRNA products to be licensed to our network? Synergium, so this was Fernando Lobos, that is the director of Synergium's production capacity, would be very keen to explore having a GMP facility and process know-how. Ike.
Thanks, Claudia. I'll take that question. So this is a piece of work that we're doing from GIZ, and it was 2 stages. The first stage was identify all products in the clinical pathway. So that is stage 1, and stage 2 is then to go and seek licensing opportunities with those companies. So that's going to follow in stage 2. And to Fernando in Synergium, yeah, very happy to keep you abreast of progress on that.
Thanks. I'm Kerry Cullinan from Health Policy Watch. I've got 2 questions. One might be easy and one's maybe a little bit clumsy. It shows that I possibly don't understand the network properly. The easy one is I heard Argentina, they put up that they were going to be looking into a feline vaccine. So I just wondered whether other partners were going to be looking at animal vaccines. And if that is, possibly a way that you can get money. And then Michelle mentioned something about trying to look at the pipeline of products in the whole network. And I just wondered whether, if you're part of that network, would you then get preferential access to like a dengue vaccine that's made somewhere else? Maybe if South Africa suddenly had dengue, or is it just willing buyer, willing seller? Thanks.
So for Afrigen, as a One Health company created a few years back, we both focus on veterinary and human vaccines. For RNA, quite interesting, we are looking at self-amplifying RNA as a veterinary platform, and we're actually doing work with Robin Chattock and Imperial College, where we are doing challenging studies for a self-amplifying RNA vaccine against Rift Valley fever, and we're doing the sheep challenging studies here in South Africa. So veterinary vaccines quite important for us, but particularly what is important for us are the zoonotic diseases, which are both human and veterinary. And I think there are other partners also that's looking at veterinary vaccines as part of their business strategies, not necessarily the mRNA tech transfer program. And the access answer, I think, Charles, you want to take it?
Thank you. Just before I do, were there any other partners who wanted to comment on whether they're looking at animal vaccines? Okay.
So I will just mention that there's a group, so there's a consortium between the Brazilians with Tunis on leishmaniasis. Now, this is firstly a human vaccine, but it can also be applied to animals. And prior to getting policy development for human use, it might be possible that this vaccine would be used firstly in partner canine animals. So that's one. It's not specifically said, and West Nile as well.
And then in terms of the licensing, it's important to remember that at the beginning, WHO put out a call for expressions of interest to receive this technology. And other than a couple of cases where there were some complicated technical or political issues, basically everybody who applied was granted a membership of this elite club. So, yes, the partners would be given preferential treatment over somebody who was not part of the partnership. Now, it may be that we have something that has huge potential in terms of numbers, but very low profit margins. And so you want huge volume, but it may be that, you know, only 2 or 3 of the partners want to be involved, and in which case we would think about licensing out to others in order to try and get the volumes that you need. So it will be on a case-by-case basis, as with so many of these things. But the whole point of this network is about sharing, and it's very different, I think, from models that have been tried before in terms of IP, and being much more sharing and collaborative, as I said.
Thank you for all the presentations. I think they were very useful to get a sense about progress thus far. A number of the speakers alluded to this issue, but not spoken about it directly, around the issue of sustainability. There's been some work that was done by the African Union around the capacity of vaccine manufacturers on the continent. And the evidence that we got out of that exercise, which Charles, I'm sure, is aware of, is that there is significant vaccine full and finished capacity on the continent, but the ability to actually produce API is very limited. Given that scenario, is there a need maybe for coordination on the continent so we don't have vaccine manufacturers competing with each other? I think Dr. Khan mentioned the point, because this is not an area where you want the level of competition where you result in one manufacturer falling off. Is there an opportunity maybe to do that, to actually protect each of the manufacturers? Because in the absence of coordination, manufacturers will compete, right? Because they wouldn't understand what the other one's doing. I know it goes against many of the competition rules of market segmentation, etc. But I can't see how else this sector could survive in the more longer term while they're trying to develop to a level where they'll be able to produce. Yeah, thanks.
Petra, you start, then I'm going to come in. I'm afraid you're going to get the cynic's view as well. So sorry about that.
So I think in 2020, when the initiative starts, there were literally, I think, 2 companies on the continent that could produce drug substance, drug product, full finish, and this is BCG and yellow fever. Today, we have 25 prospective manufacturers, and we have an overcapacity of full finish within 3 years. So the AVMI, the African Vaccine Manufacturers Initiative, which is constitute of 42 members, which are manufacturers or prospective manufacturers on the continent, are working very closely with, for example, in the case of Gavi, for the Gavi countries, to ensure that we don't have duplication of products, to make sure that the AFMA incentives that's been created by Gavi is strategically applied. And there are increasingly studies being done in quite detail by Clinton Health Initiative, by PASS, and by Gates Foundation to give a reality check for the continent, to carefully monitor where we are overcapacitating, where we are undercapacitating, where there is, we're pursuing vaccine candidates which already has 100% market share by other players. So it is I think we will migrate very carefully over the next 10 years to ensure that the continental sector is sustainable. But and Martin is going to say that, it's a very difficult thing. You can't remove competition, and there's a component of healthy competition. But I think the continental leadership is acutely aware that we can't afford to have white elephants on the continent, and that we have to be very strategic on which products, which platforms, and which countries actually then has a full manufacturing system. And the other thing that will restrict is, of course, the NRAs. You know, what are the maturity level of NRAs? And I think that will be not a restrictor, but a balancer. Martin, over.
Okay, so now a little bit of a that I can reality check. So let me begin with the first phrase, which you've heard me say several times today: there ain't no free lunch. Now, what this means is that somebody has to pay for the vaccines that come out. Now, this is when it becomes difficult. When you build a big factory, which is making multiple products, the cost per dose goes down. This is called efficiency and scale. Now, what's lovely about mRNA, actually, the cost of the product is pretty independent of the scale. Not completely, but you can get the same cost per dose at a small facility, medium and big facility. But for all of the other vaccine technologies, a small facility, and I'm looking Vaxera, you've got you were Vaxera, the experience of this. If your facility is just providing for your country, a small, medium-sized country, your cost per dose is high. And then we've had this experience that we've facilitated the building. The government changes, the new minister comes in, and a few nanoseconds later, I get a call saying, Martin, can you explain why we are paying $6 a dose for our locally produced product when somebody else can sell it to us for $3? Well, they can sell it for $3 because they've got a big factory. So this is where the governments have to recognize, what is your priority? Is it autonomy, national health security, and ability to respond to a pandemic, or is it having a cheap product? And you will remember 2 years ago here with the minister saying, we're going to buy from India, and the consequences of that decision. So it is very complex. So now coming to the African continent, it will be essential to have coordination. And fortunately, the African Union is playing a key role in this. But there's not space on the African Union in Africa for a large number of manufacturers. And any manufacturer that is making 2 or 3 products will be more affordable than one making only 1 or 2 products. So it will require coordination, but it will mostly require political will from the heads of the states to say, we are in this together. Because the moment one of them says, well, actually, I'm not in this with you because I'm going to go and buy from over there, then it all falls apart. And I'm afraid the cynic's experience of politicians is they're in it together today, but not tomorrow. So sorry for the cynical view. Yeah. Yes, please.
I totally agree with what Martin's just said, but it's particularly complex because if you're going to have a rational system and you have, a few suppliers of something, let's say mRNA vaccines, that may therefore be a bit more expensive than elsewhere. You've got Gavi with AVMA, but outside of that, how are you, if it's, let's say it's going to be in South Africa, how are you going to persuade Botswana that they should buy your slightly more expensive medicine? So it's not just what you're going to do internally, it's how you're going to create a region so that you've got some economies of scale. So personally, I think that this may actually involve trade negotiations. It may not be simply just about pharmaceuticals even. If I put my John Lennon hat on just for a moment, the sort of perfect world is where, let's take vaccines. I think Moderna said they needed 70 inputs to create their mRNA vaccine. Some of those are dead simple. There isn't a country in Africa that couldn't produce at least some of the materials needed for a vaccine. And so you just spread this out across the continent so that you make sure that everybody is putting in an absolutely essential input. That just stops vaccine nationalism dead. And everybody is then invested in the entire project. But I'll take my John Lennon hat off again because it unlikely.
But indeed, as Martin was saying, there is a role for the African Union to play, and even more for Africa CDC to play. And I understand we have a comment from Abebe online from Africa CDC taking up this responsibility and announcing a manufacturers forum to discuss coordination, among other things, for Africa and for African manufacturers. So thank you, Abebe, for being online. And there was a previous comment on the veterinary vaccine from Makram that presented on behalf of Institut Pasteur Tunis on the TB vaccine that could be used to protect against bovine TB as well, given the used candidates are the same for the two strains. I understand also there is Maria de Los Angeles Cortez online with her hand up. Maria, over to you.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. I just would like to add to the previous comments that the coordination should be global. Because before these efforts and before the pandemic, the manufacturers used to divide the market and products between the different manufacturers and markets. Now with this network, we have different new manufacturers, and some of them will survive with the time, some of them not, because a natural selection process will eliminate some of them. But at the end, they will be competitors more than partners. We know that. And I like the last slide of Charles Gore, because we would like to have transparency, we would like to have technology transfer, real technology transfer to ensure that the product goes from the beginning to the end of the cycle product. But we know that this won't happen at the end. And so how, for example, us as PAHO, how can we encourage countries to avoid effort duplications, to avoid waste of resource in projects that go to nowhere, that we know that some of them will go to nowhere, and to try to increase transparency between them, and not only regional, because the market at the end will be divided, and they are going to divide the market between the strongest ones, and we will come back to the beginning. And so I think that this is an important reflection that we should do, and at least as organizations that try to coordinate this, try to give some recommendation. We don't know what, we don't know why, how many recommendations or which recommendation we should provide. But I think that the reflection has to be that as well in that way, and globally, because the market is global as well. And we know that so many of the products that will be produced in one region will go to the other regions, where we have manufacturers as well trying to survive in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Indeed, I mean, we have so many unmet health needs that really need to be tackled. And when we talk about expansion of the vaccine pipelines, probably we shouldn't think about what is already there, but we really should be thinking about innovating. And Amin presented, we're talking about a technology that is pretty flexible, versatile. Amin presented his last slide. I can't remember if it was the last one, but what about therapeutics with this technology? We really should start thinking, going beyond infectious diseases and thinking about non-communicable diseases that indeed continue to be on the rise in terms of burden of disease. And probably, this is my personal opinion, if I was an African or a new vaccine biomanufacturer coming on the market, I wouldn't think about competing on the EPI scale. I would really think about niche products that address unmet needs, and there are so many out there. Any other question, any other comment? Please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just wanted to start by, I think, echoing everyone's sentiments around just appreciating, I think, all the work, that the partners are doing, all the hard work. I think it's really impressive to hear all the progress, and also quite encouraging, honestly. Of course, earlier on, I had a question for Sela. I don't know if she's still in the room. I think it was, interesting to hear the government-owned company process version, I think, of this process, and the emphasis, I think, that she made around, taking that snail pace, because you can't talk about sustainability, I think, without talking about government leadership, political will. I think the past 2 years, I think the conversation, even within the PEPFAR space, around sustainability has been centering government leadership, including the Global Fund Board meeting, which is currently happening in my home country, Malawi, this week. There's a buzz around sustainability and about centering government leadership. I think it's good that I think this process is happening. This program rather is happening, I would say, post-pandemic, maybe when the need for us to go faster, very fast, may not really be there. But I think just listening to Sela's presentation, I was wondering, maybe from Sela, if there's anything that they have learned from this process, because you never know, maybe it's next year, we might, be hit by something that might, push all of us to go a little bit faster. So I was just wondering, maybe from her side, from their perspective as government, are there things that they have learned from these processes which future maybe government-led processes could do better? I think in terms of fast-tracking that process, I think, as she said, that I think the process has been very slow. I think especially the point around staff, the recruitment processes, the healthy workforce. I think just listening to all the conversation, the healthy workforce, strengthening the healthy workforce, I think is one of the critical pieces of this program. But I think from the presentation that she shared, it was, I think it's been slow, because we know how the government recruitment processes go, which is a reflection of many African countries on my continent, including my own country. So is Kenya thinking of other alternative, for example, recruitment processes where you have, maybe a partner who could recruit, and then 1 year after, the staff gets absorbed by the company, yeah, I think, and also in your presentation, I didn't hear funding being like an issue. I don't know if that's an issue, but I think it wasn't highlighted. Of course, I won't go to the timeline. You didn't highlight in that, in terms of what's the timeline in terms of how long it would take for you to produce a commercially available product. Yeah, but I think I was just curious to hear from Sala, especially from the government-led process, and because I'm sure if we have future government, led processes, there's a lot that they're going to learn from Kenya. Yeah, so those were my comments. But otherwise, overall, really appreciate, I think, for all the progress and all the work that the partners are putting into this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Cecilia, Sarah, you want to come in? It's coming from the back. Well.
Thank you very much. I didn't quite catch your name. Yeah, lessons learned. One of the things that we've appreciated is that as a government institution, the playground is quite like uneven. You cannot compare government-owned and also the private-owned companies. Even as we established the Kenya Biovacs, Martin, I really, really appreciate your sentiments. We need to have advanced purchase agreements, because we definitely will never be able to compete with already established manufacturing facilities. So the reason why we've established Kenya Biovacs is for the security that we will need to have as a government, especially post-COVID. We learned that when there are interruptions in global supply, then our people are left without any vaccine. So really in the beginning, we will not be able to have an affordable vaccine, or the cost will be definitely higher. So the idea is to try and see if you can get political goodwill, and also see if the parliament or MPs will understand this and give us that advance purchase agreement approval. On the issue of recruitment, as a government, what we have done, because already there's been a freeze on employment, even as we are trying to recruit, already the government, as part of austerity measures, there is a freeze on recruitment. So what we've pursued are waivers and trying to just see if they can understand that as Kenya Biovacs, we will need to recruit and competitively recruit, because we also would want to recruit experts even beyond our borders, because we don't have production scientists who have this kind of experience locally. So we would want to recruit this, and we will need to be able to pay them well and retain them, even if it's in the beginning. USAID has been able to recruit some personnel, especially for our regulator, because they also were understaffed, and we need to have maturity level 3 for the regulator. Like I mentioned, it was a disbursement condition for the World Bank funding. And so USAID recruited about 25 pharmacists for about a year, but the agreement was they were going to be absorbed after 1 year. And thankfully, all of them have been absorbed. The government was able to give a budgetary allocation for that recruitment after the 1 year. And so it's something that it's a journey. And as long as they understand that the vision of the facility, or as a manufacturer, is to have that universal health coverage and have access to vaccines in the future. You know, in Germany, I hear they started building churches that would span 500 years. You start construction of a church that 2 or 3 generations will not see. So it's the same idea. You run the race and pass the baton to the next generation. Your other question, I think, was on the funding. The government actually gave, Cecilia, in dollars, it's about the $2 billion. Maybe she can talk about the funding. She was among the first staff that established the Kenya Biovacs. So the government actually gave a significant amount of money to establish, even as we were able to get World Bank funding, and other partners also came along. So she can just speak to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the question. Indeed, the government gave some funding, but it can never be enough. We don't have enough. We need to train people as they come in. We need to do capacity building. For the mRNA technology transfer platform, we will need to set up a space for that. We need money for that. It's unfortunate that probably we didn't present that to the tune of or maybe $150 million, so that we can have a dedicated area for the mRNA technology for development. And indeed, also we have been talking about setting up a pilot production area so that we can help the clinical research scientists with clinical trial batches. For us, that appears to be an area that we could focus on. Some of the lessons that I picked as I sat around here at these discussions is about, yes, advocacy, because the government processes will always be slow, but can we put a little push behind the scenes to ensure this can happen? I think that is something we take home as we go back and see how we can fast track all these things that need to be done. Thank you.
Claudia, I wonder if I can add very briefly to what has been said. So, I think in terms of our experience in South Africa, lessons learned from dealing with the epidemics of HIV and TB and latterly COVID-19, obviously government leadership is critical, funding is critical, but I would say there are 3 really key requirements. The first is that you need to have investment in supporting a flourishing clinical platform that supports good clinical research, but also enables very strong care of people with infections and other conditions. And then secondly, you need to have very strong enabling platforms which enable translational science, which enable clinical trials. And then finally, you need to ensure that there is integration between these so that you are able to respond appropriately when you have challenges. And I think South Africa has in some sense been able to weather many challenges because of these robust platforms, regardless of the amount of funding that we have or the strength of leadership from government.
In terms of price differences between a local manufacturer and maybe a very big established manufacturer in another part of the world, one of the ways of addressing that is to have policies that require local manufacturers to make up a certain percentage of whatever you're buying. And that can be increased over time to allow this to be brought in gradually. But when we're talking about, and you know, this could be done, you know, Africa-wide. The African countries could say, we're only going to buy from African manufacturers. But then you have to be really careful about what you mean by an African manufacturer. And I'm talking about Africa, but this could apply across LMICs. Because if you want health security, you want locally owned manufacture. You don't want a subsidiary of let's take Britain since I come from there, of a British company setting up in Africa and then going, oh yes, buy from me, I'm locally produced. Because I don't think that provides you with the security, and we had the lesson in during COVID where J&J made an arrangement with Aspen for fill and finish and then asked for it all to be sent back to Europe until the press got hold of it and they changed their mind. And so that's really, really important. And it's easier for a government to put in place something that just says local manufacturing without defining it. Because clearly, you know, the continent leads an uplift in terms of capability and capacity in lots of areas. So you can maybe start like that, but I think the end ideal is that it is locally owned as well.
Very good point, Charles. Any other question, any other comment, thoughts? There's a message from Abebe. He'll be presenting tomorrow on Africa CDC plans for manufacturing in Africa, but would have been good, yes, to have him here today. And he was saying that he's really reassured by the progress he sees across the network, the mRNA network. Any other comment? Nothing online, Jalise? Good. So we are doing very well in terms of time. I'll take 5 minutes, 4 minutes, to wrap up the discussions we had today. Very high level. I took notes throughout the day, and there are key messages and key aspects that for me have resonated throughout the day. The first one is that this endeavor is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it requires indeed long-term engagement and commitment. We heard it from Kiat, we heard it from Sarah. This commitment is especially from governments, and ownership of governments is key. It has a strong tie with what Martin was saying and was reinforced by Kiat as well, on the need of a network of partners. This idea of a group of like-minded organizations that share capacity and capabilities, that meet regularly, that are across countries, across regions, diverse, so that they can cover the full end-to-end product development. And it resonates with a collective responsibility, something that is shared across the network. There are several says here in Africa that popped up in my mind throughout the day. The first one is the famous, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And the other one is it takes a village to raise a child. And it's really this shared commitment that I see here. The third point is about the need for an R&D ecosystem that sustains this vaccine manufacturing capacity that we are building. We cannot have sustainable manufacturing without this R&D ecosystem. Dr. Ntuzzi mentioned this just now, because sooner or later the pipeline will dry out if we don't have new products, new ideas coming into the picture. We need a bigger portfolio. The fourth one, we cannot be naive. We need to demonstrate that there is a strong investment case behind all these consortia that we set up and behind these new research efforts that we put in place. What does it mean? It means that we need to demonstrate there are returns. Obviously, first of all, public health returns, but also that these endeavors are economically viable. Otherwise, they will crash soon. The fifth, I think, is linked to what we were saying and looking for applications beyond vaccine, beyond communicable diseases, to expand the pipelines. And the final one, it's really a reflection on, I think Charles mentioned it throughout the day, on the catalytic role that this program has had so far, not only for the interest and commitment of donors, governments, and individual manufacturers, but also for that system beyond the actual manufacturing that requires investment. Strengthening regulatory authorities is a key for all of you manufacturers to thrive, to be able to export, to be able to engage in new development, having a strong regulator that can guide the design of the clinical trials and that knows when you present your dossier that the product is safe, effective, and of quality. The workforce strengthening, workforce creation, local skilled workforce that is absolutely essential for this. And many other initiatives that have popped up, thanks also through the buzz that this program is creating across the world. Indeed, we started with a very solid footing, with head of state inaugurating this longer-term endeavor. So my personal thank you to all those that are present here and that every day put on the mRNA hat, technology transfer program hat, and continue to bring it forward.